This time I'd like to move what's marked as Exhibit 18 in evidence.
Okay. Exhibit 18 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you. We'll skip over 19 for the moment. Go to 20, tab 20, sir. This is dated July 12th. Proposed disciplinary action from you to former Deputy Chief Gary Batten, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I believe the date of your final report is July 11th, correct?
Said July 12th.
And look at City Exhibit 5. I believe you've identified that in the black notebook as your final. That is your July 11th, correct? So it looks like the next day, 9 a.m., 9:07 a.m., you emailed, after the date of your final report, which is City Exhibit 5, you emailed former Deputy Chief Batten, correct?
Yes, sir.
And all you wrote was, as requested. You see that, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for the record, to turn the page, everybody can pull out that blank page. I'm sorry. Next page is, must have got caught in the copier. Okay, this is a July 12th, I guess, memo that was going to go from Chief Umberger to Officer Goins, correct?
Correct.
So you recall earlier when you were asked about whether you had any hand or any role in determining discipline, I believe you said you do not. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
You at least were involved here, were you not, to provide what's attached to this email behind tab 20, correct?
Correct.
So my question for you is, did you write the sentence on termination? It's on page 2. Termination of employment from the Deland Police Department.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so did you author this letter, this memo?
I did make this memo. Correct.
Okay. So you did have some role in the termination of Officer Goins, at least to the extent that you wrote this memo.
To the extent that I was told to write this memo.
Who told you to write it?
This is the process that we have for final notice. They let me know what the final notice is that they're going to go with as far as their discipline, and I write it down in the memo.
So they tell you.
The deputy chief would actually come up to me and tell me, listen, this is what we're going to go with. Did you write it down? Basically put it in there, what we decided.
So they, when you said they, that would be the deputy chief, former deputy chief, right?
Correct.
So Gary Batten tells you, this is the direction we're going to go, write me a memo.
Correct.
In this meeting that you had, was it just you and Deputy Chief Batten?
It was.
Was it a face-to-face meeting?
It was.
And again, just the two of you?
Yes.
Okay. And then you write this memo on behalf of the chief, correct?
Correct.
It's not coming from Deputy Chief Batten, although he's the one that gave you your marching orders, so to speak.
Correct.
You then write it, but it's coming from the chief.
Correct.
Okay. In this you matched or cut and pasted, I assume, the sustained findings from your report, correct? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, I can move into evidence what's been marked as Exhibit 20.
Okay. Exhibit 20 is admitted into evidence. You mean Exhibit 20?
We'll skip 21 for you, sir. See if I've got any more. Just a few more. I did have, I think I had you look at a couple of these, sir, but I don't believe I had them admitted or sought to admit them. But if you would turn to tab 27, sir. recognize this department policy regarding professional standards and discipline?
Yes, sir.
And it appears to have an effective date of June 12 of 18, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if you look at the last page, it looks like it's signed by Chief Umberger.
Yes, sir.
Is this the department's policy as it relates to handling complaints and investigations?
Yes, sir.
And would this have been the policy, to your knowledge, that would have that would have been in effect at the time of your involvement in this particular matter?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if you look at the second to last page, you see where it says attachments, sir, in blue?
I do.
And then it lists the Bill of Rights, it says the complaint form, guarantee warnings, and some other forms.
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to move what's marked into evidence as Exhibit 27.
Objection. Exhibit 27 submitted.
And then if you turn to 28, sir, this is the Bill of Rights that I believe you identified earlier today as, this is just the attachment to the policy. We know we have one signed by Officer Goins, but you recognize this
Yes, sir.
as part of the professional standards policy of the department?
Yes, sir.
This time, I'd like to move into evidence what's marked as Exhibit 28.
Objection. Exhibit 28 submitted.
And then turn to tab 29, sir. This is the citizen complaint form, which was attachment B to the department policy. I had you look at it earlier.
Yes.
You recognize this, sir?
Yes, sir.
At this time, I'd like to have this entered into evidence as Exhibit 29.
No objection. Exhibit 29 submitted.
And then another one, sir, just turn the page to Exhibit 30. This is the Garrity warning, which is attachment C to the professional standards policy. Have you seen this before, sir?
I have.
This time, I'd like to move into evidence which has been marked as Exhibit 30.
No objection. Exhibit 30 submitted.
One thing on Exhibit 30, sir, I want to ask you about. In the first full paragraph, would you agree it reads, during the course of this questioning, even if you do disclose information which indicates that you may be guilty of criminal conduct, neither your self-incriminating statements nor the fruits of any self-incriminating statements you make will be used against you in any criminal legal proceedings?
Yes, sir.
Now, isn't it true that Officer Goins' personnel file was, or I'm sorry, the IA file was sent over to the state attorney's office?
I have no, I did not send that myself.
Do you know who did?
I would imagine Deputy Chief.
Did you ever speak with a person by the name of Ashley Terwilliger at the state attorney's office?
I don't.
Okay. Turn back to tab 26 for just a moment. I want to see if you recognize this. If not, we'll move on. Wrap you up here. You should be at tab 26, which is an Office of the State Attorney letter dated February 5th, 2020. You see that, sir?
I do.
And ironically, this is 1 year to the day when you signed the citizen complaint memo to initiate this investigation, correct?
Correct.
You signed that on February 5th of 2019 to start this entire process.
Yes, sir.
Now we have a letter from the state attorney, February 5th of 2020, and it's a 3-page letter. Have you ever seen this before, sir?
No.
I just want to ask you, look on page 2. Well, I'm sorry, sir. Turn back to page 1 just for the opening paragraph,
Okay.
where it says the Office of the State Attorney received copies of the internal affairs investigation. Do you see that, sir? You see
Yes,
that?
sir. Oh, no, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
My question is, you told us earlier today, and I know you've been testifying for a while now. We're almost finished. You told us earlier today that you responded to a records request for the office of Attorney Dempsey, correct?
Correct.
Here we have the state attorney asking, or at least stating, that they received copies. It doesn't say they requested copies, they received copies. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And even though you were involved in in responding to the public records request of Attorney Dempsey, are you telling us under oath you were not involved in providing copies of this IA file to the state attorney's
No,
office?
sir, I did not give the state attorney's office
Okay.
paperwork.
Just turn briefly to page 2. I just want to ask you one or two questions about an entry here for Officer
Page
Goins.
2 on this.
Yes, sir. Page 2 of this letter.
Okay.
Do you see in the paragraph with the round bullet, and there's like a dark bullet point under Officer Leslie Goins, and then an indented other bullet? Do you see that, sir?
I do.
In the middle of the page? Would you agree that Assistant State Attorney Terwilliger goes into explanation about what you could see and couldn't see from the dash cam? I'm sorry, the body worn camera?
Yes, sir.
In particular, you see this sentence that reads, in Officer Goins' BWC, his camera is pointed at the dash so you are unable to see his view when he approaches. You see that, sir?
I do not, I'm looking for it.
Right, almost smack dab in the middle of the page. Begins with in Officer
Yes,
Goins'
I see it.
BWC.
Yes, sir.
And he goes on to say, would you agree, while the IA investigation recreated the scene, the circumstances were not the exact same as the evening that Officer Goins arrived. You see that, sir?
I see that.
Assistant State Attorney Terwilliger was accurate in that statement, wasn't she?
Yes, sir.
And she goes on to say, Officer Goins is a trained marksman from his time at the Department of Corrections and has been adamant throughout the internal affairs investigation that he was able to see the contact between Officer LaFleur and Mr. Staff. You see that, sir?
I see that.
And she says there's insufficient evidence to show exactly what was or was not seen. You see that, sir?
I see that.
So in your final report, you differ obviously also with Assistant State Attorney Ashley Terwilliger, correct?
Yes, sir.
You believe, you told us yesterday, that there's no way that Officer Goins saw what he saw, correct?
Yes, sir.
And here you have an Assistant State Attorney saying there's insufficient evidence, correct?
Correct.
So you reached a conclusion on your own that an attorney is saying there was not sufficient evidence for it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then go to the very last page, last paragraph, third page. Do you see where she concludes by saying there's insufficient evidence to support a conviction against Leslie Goins or Officer LaFleur for falsifying statements in the arrest affidavit or incident reports?
Yes, sir.
So somebody in the police department did not want to only end the employment of Officer Goins and LaFleur, but wanted to seek to criminally prosecute them, correct?
Objection, that assumes facts, not evidence.
Is that,
Hang on, there's an objection,
Okay.
and I'll give you a response.
Okay.
But
All
I'm
right.
inclined to sustain this.
okay, I'll withdraw it then. I'll ask it a different way. When you read that statement, does it seem to you or appear to you that someone in the police department had asked the state attorney's office to see if there was grounds to criminally convict Officer Goins and Officer LaFleur?
Absolutely. Somebody sent some documentation showing, obviously, she got to this, grabbing this document here
Okay.
based on the investigation, so.
And somebody apparently sent the IA report, the IA documents that included everything that he testified to under a Garrity warning, correct?
I'm not sure what was sent. I'm not sure what was sent to the state attorney's.
Would you agree, based on your training and experience, the purpose of Garrity is to avoid the very thing that we just looked at in Ms. Terwilliger's letter, and that is to seek to criminally prosecute someone on the basis of their IA testimony?
Yes, sir.
Now, we know one last thing happened as well, and that is that someone in this agency also sought to see if there were grounds to take away the law enforcement certification of Officer Goins. Are you aware?
Sorry?
Someone sought to seek to have action taken against the certification of Officer Goins as a licensed law enforcement officer. Are you aware of that?
Objection, that also assumes facts that are not in evidence.
All right, we'll put those facts into evidence right now, and I'll be asked. Turn to tab 42, sir. I know these are emails of which you appear to not be copied on, but I want to ask if you have any knowledge of emails by and between Chief Umberger and a person by the name of Jason Kriegsman, Kriegsman of the FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
I know who he is. I don't know about this.
Did you ever have any discussions with Jason Kriegsman about any documents needed to seek to take action against the certification of Officer Goins' law enforcement certification?
I don't know that I ever had a conversation with Mr. Case on this case.
Now, you're licensed, you have certification as a sworn law enforcement officer in the state of Florida, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when I use that terminology, you know what I'm talking about?
As far as
You have to be,
certified.
yeah, I'm a licensed attorney, you have to be a certified law enforcement officer, correct?
Sir.
And just as Alex and I, and even the arbitrator, Mr. Finnegan, we're accountable to something called the bar,
Yes,
Florida
sir.
Bar, you all as law enforcement officers are accountable to an agency called the FDLE, correct?
That's correct.
And they can take action against your license or your certification, correct?
Yes, sir.
Up to and including suspending or terminating your certification and thereby forever preventing you serving as a law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes, sir.
And lastly, are you ever asked to sign off on what's known as a CJSTC, Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission, Form 61, Affidavit of Separation?
No, I don't sign that.
You understand that's a document that goes from an agency to the FDLE for any officer who separates from an agency and has to account for the basis of the separation,
I do.
whether it's fired, quit,
Yes, sir.
criminally charged, whatever, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you're not asked in your role in any way, shape, or form to complete that form?
If I was asked, I'm not sure whether they asked me to complete that form or not. I don't think Deputy Chief Batten had access to the ATMS.
Okay. I did skip one document, I promise this is my last one, famous last words, Attorney, I'm sorry. Exhibit 31. This is the prisoner detainee transport policy. Are you there, sir?
I am.
This has already been admitted into evidence. Just want to ask you a couple of quick questions about this. Have you ever seen this policy before, sir?
I have.
Are you aware that on page 2 of this policy, that it states that the arresting transporting officer shall thoroughly search each prisoner for weapons and contraband prior to transport?
Yes, sir.
It goes on to say, does it not, this applies to all transports, and it has all in bold, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Including transfers from other officers or agencies, correct? So, in the big scheme of things, we spent a lot of time, several hours, talking, you testified yesterday and again today, whether Mr. Staff was arrested or detained. If he was going to be transported in a police vehicle, he was going to be searched, correct?
Yes.
And if he had cocaine in his back pocket, in or around his wallet, that would have been found in a search, correct?
You would hope so, yes.
Okay? So this agency has a policy that is signed by Chief Umberger, is it not? Look on page 1, date of issue 10/12/18. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And look to the very last page. Looks like it's signed by Jason Umberger too, correct?
Correct.
And this is a policy that you and all your fellow officers of the DeLand Police Department are expected to know and follow, correct? So when Officer Goins, whether he was patting him down or searching him, Mr. Staff, prior to him being put in the police vehicle of Officer LaFleur, that was in compliance with this policy, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
I have nothing further, sir. Thank you.
It's now 2:15. It's your redirect.
Yes, sir.
You want to take a break as we transition, or you want to delve right into your redirect?
Let's take 10 minutes.
Yeah,
That's okay.
and that's perfect timing, because if I may, I was just told that Exhibit 11, which is, I'm sorry, City Exhibit 5, if you might want to check on our break, Alex, I think there's 5 charges, and he told me I was just told there's actually 6. The final has 5.
Hang on, are we on the record or off?
This can be on the record. We just want to make sure we have the right final version.
There's 6. 5 on the first page and 1 on the second one is what it
What
looks
I'm
like.
talking about, the completion, the sustained, there's only 5 sustained. You're missing the false arrest on your finalized sustained.
On the one that's in the city book?
The one, yep, I'm looking at yours.
Which one is missing, you're saying?
Hang on, let's
I guess we can do this off the record. I'm sorry.
whatever you're figuring out on this exhibit, let's do on the break. We'll come back from the
Okay.
break and straighten that out.
The second.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir, you're still on the witness stand. We'll come back to the break.